Hi there. In this video, we will shift the gear from talking about the process of fraud investigation and forensic accounting into the fraud examiner himself. Just to give you a quick recap of what we covered in the previous topics, that first we say to go through the forensic accounting or fraud examination process, we need to identify the red flags. Then we need to search for evidence to support the red flags. And then we make interviews for collecting more information. And if we find the suspect is the person that we expect that he commit the fraud, then we make interrogation. And then we start talking about the different types of fraud cases, like either physical fraud or cyber fraud, and we start to analyze the different kinds of attacks in the cyberspace. But now we come to the fraud examiner himself. If the fraud examiner finds some ethical dilemma. What do we mean by ethical dilemma? It means there are several situations and none of them is having good outcome. So we say, what shall we do if we have several choices and all the outcomes, they show some kind of negative effects and there is no correct answer. And before we dive into this issue, we need to know when we come to the ethical dilemma, there is no clear framework for every case about how to resolve the ethical dilemma. So we make the assumption that all the people in the good society, they have trust in doing the right thing. And this would be our background and our foundation whenever we see any ethical dilemma and we don't know which way we should take, we should do the right thing. And we ask a question, is what we are planning to do, is it legal? If it is legal, then we start working on this approach or taking this approach. But we need to keep in mind that following the ethical approach, it's taking one step higher than following the rules and regulations. The rules and regulations are the minimum that we should keep in mind when we take any action, but the ethical approach is doing the right thing. What does it mean? I might follow the rules and regulations, and this will justify my action as legal, but it doesn't justify my ethical approach. So we need to keep in mind that the ethical approach is one step higher than the legal approach. And we should not take the wrong approach because it has a better ending. No, we should take the right approach and we should look for the better ending. So the end does not justify unethical means that we should take in our investigation. And here we have three different principles we can keep it in mind. First, following the rules and regulations, and this one we call it imperative principle. So the imperative principle, it means that everybody in the society is aware of the rules and regulations, and we should ignore the outcomes by providing rules and regulations, and anything doesn't follow those rules, we should not take it. The other one, we call it utilitarian principle, where we weigh the good and the bad consequences and make sure the consequences we take have better ending, and we should not take any approach that has bad consequences. The third one, we call it generalizing principle. And here we say the bottom line for this principle that we should not take any approach that has bad consequences without justifying the needs for that. So we should have good reason if we plan to take any action that might have bad consequences. Then we might say this is a big issue, because if I don't have a clear framework and I have many principles, then can I get some guidance to make the right decision? We say yes. There are different organizations. One of them is the Association of Certified Fraud Examiner, ACFE. And this organization has lots of fraud examiner as members that can help the fraud examiner to make the right decision. This organization and many similar organizations, they have key characteristics. Number one, they have good body of knowledge. Number two, the goals of this kind of organization like ACFE and other organizations is to advance the profession of fraud examination and forensic accounting. And those organizations, they have standards, they have rules, they have interpretation that can give guidance to the fraud examiner if he faces any kind of ethical dilemma. And we recommend that the fraud examiner go through these standards and become certified fraud examiners. And this will give them the qualification to make better decisions. And also those organizations, they have hotlines and members that can guide the fraud examiner in case he faces any issue. Number two, the companies that the fraud examiners are going to work with, they should have a good foundation by making code of conduct, and they should have tone at the top. What does it mean? It means the board of directors, the executive managements, they develop code of conduct, they communicate it to all the employees, they hire the right employees, they make them aware of the code of conduct and sign for that, and they play the role model before the employees to make sure that the executive management is not tolerant with any fraud cases. And if they discover any fraudulent cases, it will be examined and disciplinary action will be taken immediately. This is what we mean by tone on the top. And we should create the control environment that can give a good example for the employees that if any fraud is examined or discovered, it will be treated immediately. So what we usually say, number one, there should be a code of ethics in the company. And this code of ethics is communicated to all the people, and all the people sign for this code of ethics that they are aware of it. Number two, the company should hire the right employees. They should check the references, and they should make some kind of investigation about those employees if their position is sensitive, and make sure that those people are honest, transparent, and so on. And they give them good training, and they explain to them who will be their supervisor and what are their responsibilities. And every year they should give them regular training. Usually it's online class where the employees, they sign up for this class, they go through the material and take a quiz to test their understanding about the updates in the code of conduct. Then we should establish good internal control system, and the internal control system or environment works mainly on segregating the jobs and make sure that there is different people doing the same transaction. So the person who is authorizing the situation or the transaction is different from the one who's making control, different from the one who's doing recording. And this way of segregation will create good internal control system. Then we should run continuing education about fraud awareness for the employees at least once a year. And we should provide assistance to the employees if they have any problem. A good example, hotlines where people, they can call 24/7 a certain number to get some kind of assistance or report any kind of incident or red flag the employees that might have noticed in the workplace. And we should provide protection for the whistleblower. And once the management, they receive any call about incident, we should take disciplinary procedures immediately. How? Examine the situation, bring fraud examiner to explore the different evidences that we can collect for this situation, and we take disciplinary action if we find that the evidence and the red flags are correct. And here, usually, the fraud examiner should make some kind of brainstorming session or risk assessment to identify the exposure or the vulnerability in the system or the incident. And the fraud examiner should start looking for the symptoms and look for the red flags. And once we identify the red flags, then we collect some evidence to report the red flags. Then the fraud examiner has to check the compliance program, because there are certain items or certain risks that can become red flags by itself. Good example, the economic situation of the employees. If the economy is going into recession or depression or market volatility, this might provoke the people to commit fraud. And this would be a big risk that the fraud examiner has to identify. We call it economic risk. Another thing is regulatory risk. If we find red flags about the safety or the environmental, here I say environmental, I mean the lack of compliance for environmental law or financial reporting, where people might manipulate the information in the financial reporting and cook the financial statements for the sake of getting incentive or potential investor to work with them. This could be a big risk. So the fraud doesn't have to be actual stealing, but providing incorrect information. Also, it could be cyber threat, and this is also another risk. Or it could be production below the lack of the quality standards, where we produce the product below the minimum quality standards. And by doing that, we might use poor raw materials and reducing the price of our product for the sake of getting more customers. This, we call it operational risk. Also, using new technology might come up with different threats on the database of the company or the computer system. So here, this list can tell you the kind of risks the fraud examiner should look for to identify it and use it as a hint to investigate for more evidence about those risks. Also, reputation and brand risk and sustainability. And once we identify the risk, we should look at the people, because if the people, they have a fear about being caught if they commit fraud and being penalized, this might give a peace of mind to the fraud examiner that those people will not commit fraud. So we need to identify the perception of the people about the fraud If they are aware that the internal control environment exists, and if they commit fraud, they will be caught, this will give a peace of mind for the fraud examiner that there is good compliance in this company. Also, the fraud examiner has to check if there is any clear supervision above the employees, and if there is any kind of unexpected examination or investigation, or what we call it surprise audit, that might happen every now and then. This will give a peace of mind for the fraud examiner, because surprise audit means employees are ready for unexpected audit that might come from the internal audit department, and this will keep them up to the standard to make sure that they are not violating any standard. And there should be some kind of communication with the code of conduct on a regular basis for the employees, and enough training for them, and highlight the issue that if they don't follow the rules, they will be caught. So this is in brief what the fraud examiner should do to avoid any kind of fraud. And my apologies for not having my camera in this video, because my laptop is broken down and I'm using another one now. But I hope you find this brief video useful about the ethical dilemma the fraud examiner might face and how can he resolve those issues. I will continue talking about the rest of the topic in another video. Thank you. Bye-bye.